Okay, Anna, it's all you.
Okay, I think that was the nicest introduction I've ever gotten in my life. I'm just gonna share my screen with you and get kind of set up here. Um, okay, can you see that, everyone?
Yes.
Great, thank you. And I also turned my video off too. Anyway, thank you so much, Sierra Nevada University, for having me. It feels so great to be part of this residency, and I'm really enjoying getting to know most of you. And speaking of which, everyone advises when giving an artist talk that you should never get too personal and stay focused on the work. But because I don't get the chance to sit by the fire with you and have coffee and get to know you, I'm gonna do all of the forbidden no-nos in this talk and get more personal than I normally do. So please excuse the cheesiness. And then it's also geared slightly more towards students as an audience. Okay, so as Anza said, I'm an artist and a scientist, and I live and work in California's beautiful city of trees, the capital, Sacramento. And I've always had this somewhat debilitating problem of having way too many interests, like many of you probably do as well. And I think that stems from being from a small town of 300 in rural Illinois, where we are pretty much void of any other types of cultures other than my own. We didn't even have a library, and I had to steal books from the nearby library as a kid because they wouldn't give me a library card in that town. So my sisters and brothers craved to learn about other cultures, to get out in the world and travel and talk to lots of strangers and learn. I attended a small liberal arts college, which was really good for me. It allowed me to study everything from Chinese philosophy to art to science. I studied abroad 3 times. I studied art in Greece and ecology in Costa Rica and the Zapatista movement in Chiapas, Mexico. I loved school, and I would stay a college student forever if I could. So I managed to finally pick some majors, biology and art, which I felt like was kind of a big compromise. And since then, I've always had one foot in the door of science and the other in art. There's kind of a turning point for me in terms of this convergence of art and science. I spent all my summers at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, where I studied in a molecular plant physiology lab. And I studied how plants loaded and transported and used their photosynthetic products. And the more I stared into a microscope and did complex experiments, the more I started seeing art. And looking at plant parts in a microscope was so fun for me. And it also helped to have this hyper enthusiastic botany professor who I loved. The thing I love about plants and about cells, period, or other organisms, looking at things under a microscope, is there's so much beauty, different patterns, specific functions for each cell that I was looking at. Form and function. What important terms for everything, but especially in science and art. And these terms have been following me around as I began to learn how morphology, how a plant looks, it's evolutionarily related to how it functions. And then you go into the molecular and micro scales of the plant and begin to understand how environment dictates form and function at the finest levels. So we're all products of our DNA and our environment, and this is sort of a theme, if you will, of my work and how I live my life. So I'm continually amazed at these tiny sculptures that nature made, like pollen granules. I could stare at those all day. Or weird diseases on trees and a tree's response. And I think of this, for example, as an amazing sculpture. When I was supposed to be focused in the lab on science, I was instead using thin layer chromatography to make drawings. And I loved the aesthetics of looking at DNA bands. And I thought I had discovered this whole new form of art, like oh, bioart, I'm a genius. But then I realized there was already this movement called bioart, and I was so behind the times. And I had to catch up. So when it was time for graduate school, I had an extremely difficult time choosing between art school or to pursue plant physiology. So I ended up going to UC Davis for my PhD in plant physiology, focusing mostly on trees. And when you're in a program like this, you're on a pretty tight schedule, and you have expectations from your graduate advisor to focus and produce. Instead of taking more statistics classes, though, I was sneaking sculpture classes in the art department with Professor Lucy Pulse, who was teaching this class called Material Explorations. And that class had a real big impact on me. She was the first person who seemed encouraging and somehow got my logic when I said I wanted to be an artist, but I was in a PhD program for science. So her class really taught me how to embrace the weird materials we work with and how to push a material to make it do something it doesn't do. And I really loved that challenge. I began working with potato dextrose agar, which, if any of you have worked with Petri dishes in school before, it's potatoes and sugar and agar, and it's basically the food that the fungus and bacteria eat. So I was working with PDA and fungus, and I grew it in all kinds of different ways, and I was literally watching my art grow cell by cell, going from something invisible to something visible, which again, I was like, oh my God, something invisible, I'm making it visible, I'm like a magician. But you know, people have been doing that for forever. But I would build these giant plywood petri dishes, if you will, and fill them with potato dextrose agar, and then inoculate them with fungus that I thought was cool or aesthetically interesting. And working this large, which I was working much larger, it's really hard to keep things sterile. You can't be in a sterile hood. So sometimes it would be more of this collaboration between me and whatever else was dwelling in my studio, which was my dirty garage at the time. This was one of those paintings that I was pretty hands off of. And I really loved the way the fungus in my studio that was invisible sort of painted itself. And that was pretty magic for me. This was more of a controlled version. And yeah, one thing I like about working with this material is that sometimes it looked celestial and other times super microcosm. And I liked how I couldn't really differentiate between that. And so there was like no scale, which I really liked. So I was working with this material for a long time, experimenting a lot, just exploring and trying to just do whatever I could with the material. I started weaving with it. These are kind of up close images of the material itself. So I would inoculate the petri dishes, kind of get it to a spot where I liked it, and then use oil-based polyurethane to cover it and kind of like hold it in place a little bit. I started quilting with it. I would hold stitch and bitches, which is probably a really outdated term right now. So I guess I should go with quilting bees. But yeah, so we made quilts, and this is the quilt that I made. And this is kind of a closer view of all of the stitches. So by now I'd finished my PhD and gone straight into art school afterwards to get my MFA. And what's funny is the same thing that happened to me in art school, or in science, when I was supposed to be taking more science classes. In art school, I started sneaking off back over to the other side, taking science courses, including mushroom cultivation, but for the purposes of my artwork, of course. So I began getting really interested in artists who are using more natural materials for their sculpture, especially fungus, like artists like Phil Ross, for example. And so I started learning how to grow these, and my studio became this like plastic covered sterile environment that was pretty weird. And this is a sculpture that came out of that time. And this is oyster mushrooms and velvet and hay and plastic and moisture. I ended up harvesting this and invited my art school cohort over to eat the art, and made oyster mushroom pasta, which was okay. Okay, so living in the Central Valley of California, where most of our big crops are bee pollinated, and also studying at this big agricultural and ecology school, the decline of our bee populations became pretty important and very scary. So I started working first with dead bees that I got from entomologists studying the bee decline. And then I would build objects out of bee pollinated wood, like cherry, that represents the effects of man on bees and the fact that we rely on them so much. And so I built this table that's supposed to sort of represent man, and out of cherry wood, and then the bees are sort of its shadow. So I started keeping bees and wanting to work with them live. And well, actually, so one time I was laying on this blanket in the Capitol Park, and I was just staring at the sky, looking up at a tree, and out of thin air, these paper wasps built this huge, huge wasp nest, like right in front of me. It was like nothing, and then 5 minutes later, there was this huge paper wasp nest, and I was just like, whoa! You know, the invisible made visible again, and they just built it in 5 minutes, right? Amazing. And so I started keeping bees and building armatures that then the bees could sort of make sculptures with. And so I like this, these coordinated efforts with myself and the bees. And this is one of the results of that time. I didn't really make anything that looked that great with the bees, but it was kind of a fun process. And I was also TAing and teaching sculpture classes in art school and watching this gross overuse of these precious materials be used by these students in like introductory sculpture classes. And then they'd all be thrown out in the dumpster. So it'd be like Home Depot dumpster, Home Depot dumpster, Home Depot dumpster. And so I wanted to kind of make a sculpture that just ate itself when it was done and was actually good for the world. So I got into red wigglers, which are composting worms, and began making these small sculptures sewn out of a thin netting, and then filled it with compost and worms. And what I really liked about this is that when you put them on, I put them on pedestals, and then people would, like during the show, would come and sort of look at the pedestal, and the sculpture would like be moving a little bit, like ever so slightly, and it's like, wait, is this sculpture moving? Because it was really slow, and it kind of just like wiggle around, and you can see that, like, you know, it moved a little bit. And so I thought that was kind of funny. And so yeah, I wanted the sculpture to just basically eat itself. And it proved to be really difficult. The gallerists had to squirt, you know, keep it moist all the time, and then the worms started like eating their way out of the netting and then like crawling all over everybody else's art in the show, and it was kind of a disaster. It was a learning experience, I guess. So I stopped working with worms because it was too hard. Okay, so another imminent threat here in California are forest fires, and I began thinking about them. I was, you know, raised in cold Illinois, like I said, and we spent a lot of time sitting around the potbelly stove getting warm because that was the only source of heat we had in my house. And it was really, this object, the potbelly stove, is one of the most, I don't know, an object that I hold very dear to my heart, because that's where my family would come and congregate. And so I did some video pieces, some like video collages, which was kind of my introduction to video, of forest fires and helicopters and sort of the chaos that went into forest fires, and then projected it inside of the potbelly stove, and then wired up electricity so you could actually sit by the potbelly stove and warm yourself up without melting the video stuff inside, so people could come and have conversations about the well-being of our forests. It was kind of like a pretty didactic lecture-y piece, and a lot of my earlier pieces were. So I had to try to like get away from that. Okay, so switching gears now. As my students know, who are in my class, I'm a big fan of earth art, and also sort of annoyed at what a man's world earth art was. But nevertheless, I desperately wanted to interact with work like this. So this was a piece I did at Michael Heiser's Double Negative that was made in 1969. And I used so basically he carved out these two negative spaces in these mesas that sort of face each other. And I used the negative space as a literal hurdle to create my own work, in high heels and a yellow 70s dress. And that kind of served as a metaphor for the hurdles for female sculptors that were faced with in the 70s and still are, and how female sculptors had to sort of change their personality, especially sometimes female sculpture professors have to become like bitchier, I guess, to thrive in the art world. And I hated that. And so that was kind of what this piece became about. And these are some images of that video piece. And so this time at this point I was kind of interested in like putting myself in the imagery of my work. During that, I spent a lot of time in the desert around that time, and I began mining for my materials so I could make paintings with them. And this was a piece that resulted from my mining. And this accompanied the double negative and yellow piece. This was sort of the sculptural contribution to the work. And this became part of my MFA thesis show. Okay, I hope I'm not boring you. I'm going to tell you a personal story that sort of changed my life and began to influence the work that I do now. So around, I don't know, 2009 or 2010, I went on this solo backpacking trip to Chile, to Torres del Paine. And it was my first time that I saw a glacier and slept on a glacier. And I felt this really amazing connection while sleeping on this powerful chunk of ice. And that was a really special moment for me. And also I was alone too, so I think that had a lot to do with it, but I felt very in tune with this glacier. And that's Glacier Gray. And then, you know, I'm hiking with my backpack on this little bridge, and on this little drawbridge all by myself, and I'm right in the middle of the bridge, and this is the view from the bridge, and all of a sudden I heard like the loudest, deepest sound I'd ever heard in my entire life. And of course, sound travels first, and then I look up and there's this avalanche happening up high on this mountain by kind of where that fog is. And it's just like happening, and I'm sitting there on this bridge watching this over this river. And it was the most sublime moment of my life. And I was trying to like describe it, and the only word I could think of was sublime, because it was like really beautiful and also really scary. I mean, I was at a like safe distance, but it was just pretty amazing to watch this avalanche that was just for me. I was its only audience, and I felt like Mother Nature had kind of like put me back in place, like, you know, put me back in the food chain. Like all my problems went away. I was just another little animal. So that was a really important moment for me for the rest of my work. And so since then, I've been trying to find ways to get back to the sublime moment, and how I felt at that moment. It kind of became like this addiction. And I was trying to figure out like how to put myself in these vulnerable situations where I'm totally exposed to the earth in a really raw way. And so I wanted more ice. I wanted to get like primordial and to find this sublime again. I wanted to be humbled by Mother Nature. And so I began this quest, and going to places where I could try to like get that feeling again. This is a geyser in the Atacama Desert in Chile. I started taking pictures and finding myself at all these geyser systems because they feel like this primordial soup. You know, that they have these archaea growing in them, which are super ancient organisms that we all came from. And so I just started like geyser chasing, and then like scraping up archaea and then painting with them, which was probably really illegal in a lot of spots I was at. So yeah, I began making these like drawings that I'm not a painter. They don't look good, but I was doing it anyway. And I like the archaea, like at the Great Salt Lake. This is at the Spiral Jetty. And so I started like putting my body inside of these like really raw, remote areas, and just like exploring my sense of self as an animal and as a product of an environment, and how like ill-adapted I am and ill-equipped for these environments, and how I have no reason for being there. And yeah, I started getting more into video. Moulins also have a similar effect on me as geysers. They're pretty scary, but also really cool. Moulins are these vertical or nearly vertical shafts in a glacier formed by surface water percolating through a crack in the ice. And so when you hike on glaciers, you gotta be pretty careful. So I got this like summer grant during my MFA and got enough money to buy this nice camera for the first time in my life. And I went backpacking in Alaska to try to find this sublime moment again, and to try to find glaciers to hang out on and make work about. This is the Harding ice field in Alaska. I had a really nice time there filming, and then yeah, just doing a lot of filming. And then this is what I made in my studio. Came back to my studio and started projecting video through ice, and I really loved the way the ice looked. So I started working more with ice. So this was my studio for a while. This is a gigantic freezer that I'd get my snowsuit on and go work in this freezer in Fairfield, California. And it was just like a sculpture shop, but everything was just ice. It was pretty cool. And I started making these sculptures. This is ice and used motor oil. And this was right about the time where there is an oil spill near Santa Barbara. And so I think that influenced me. And then this is what it looked like as it melted. And the way the ice cracks and the oil interacts with the ice and the water is really, really beautiful and interesting. And just sort of like, it was kind of like a physics experiment to watch these different fluids interact with each other. I started working with poets, and I would write the poetry in clay in the ice, and then we'd hang the poems up in the trees and watch them melt. And that was kind of fun. I really like working with poets a lot because they work in a really different way than I'm used to. Yeah, more like performance, snow, dynamite happening here. Okay, so I saw this artist named Janet Biggs who gave a talk at the School for Visual Arts in New York, and I was in the audience, and she was talking about her experience in the Arctic. And she was just like such a badass, and I was just watching her talk with envy, and I loved her work, and I was like, I want to do what she's doing. That's who I want to be like. So I applied to the Arctic Circle Residency, which is in Svalbard, Norway, which, yeah, here's Europe, and it's pretty far up there, like 78 degrees or something like that. And we're on this boat, this glacial sailing vessel. It has 11 sails. And we sailed through the fjords of Svalbard and then went up all the way to the North Pole, which was pretty exciting for me. I got to stand on the ice pack of the North Pole at 82 degrees. So that was pretty exciting. And I made a lot of work while I was there. I was making cyanotypes of melting glacial ice. I was collecting, making prints of the flora that was there, and taking a lot of pictures of this really beautiful and dynamic landscape. I brought a bunch of footage back with me, and I started making some videos. Of these melting glaciers, and yeah, I'm not going to make you guys watch the whole thing or anything, but so the music is by Heather Spence, and my friend Marco, who's on here, I think, still, recorded it. Heather playing her cello, and so we were all at this residency, the Djerassi residency, where I met Anza, and so I asked Heather if she would play some music for this piece. And let me take you to another spot. Uh-oh. This is the breakdown. Okay, well, anyway, it seems like maybe it's not loaded. So we'll just skip it. Anyway, so I started doing video work from, oh, there we go. From the footage that I took there. Oh, okay, yeah, it's very emotional. Okay. Okay, I want to move on, but I have the pinwheel. Okay, great. So, yeah, and then I started making sculptures in my studio out of clay. I never really had used clay very much, and it just started making sculptures that reminded me of icebergs. Oh God, I've got the pinwheel again. I'm so sorry. I really need a new computer. I apologize. So, yeah, what you're looking at on the right is porcelain and rubber from used bike tires to hold all the pieces together. And I made a bunch of these, and they're pretty fun to make, and it was really fun to experience clay. Okay. Oop. So, okay, I hope you're still here. So at Djerassi, I met Margot Knight, and she saw the video work I made from my time in the Arctic and in the Arctic Ocean, and suggested that I get involved with this group called the Ocean Memory Project. And the Ocean Memory Project, so basically every year the National Science Foundation, or the National Academies, they have this Keck Futures Initiative where they give a bunch of money to people to ask these sort of crazy ideas or crazy questions. And one of the questions that came out from that meeting was, does the ocean have a memory? And so these are a group of people, very dynamic group of people. There's anthropologists, there's oceanographers, psychologists, writers, dancers, all these people thinking about the same question. Does the ocean have a memory? And we wanted to sort of make this paradigmatic shift of how we think about the ocean. And so I got involved with them, and I'm still involved with them. And they're all so cool and interesting people. And we meet up on boats and have these sort of meetings about, does the ocean have a memory? And it's really fascinating to hang out with all of these people. And it was there that I was learning about these hydrothermal vent systems that are at the bottom of the ocean. And I met Susan Lang when I was there, who invited me on a cruise. Uh-oh. Okay. I might have a technological breakdown soon, but I'm going to try. Hopefully it doesn't happen. Okay. So she invited me on this cruise with her to the Lost City hydrothermal vent system. Oh no, I'm having the pinwheel. It wants to force quit. Okay. I'm so sorry about this.
Anna, take your time. If you have to restart, no sweat.
Okay. I'm gonna, yeah.
Everyone's very on board with you.
Okay.
In the chat, but there's a lot of love.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, it's
So the question from Karen is, I'm curious about the idea of collaborating with so many beings that you cannot communicate with through language. How has that shifted the ways that you collaborate with humans now?
they're quieter. I don't know. I guess I have never really thought about that before. I guess it doesn't really change the way I communicate and collaborate with humans, I don't think. I'm sorry, I don't really know. Any other questions?
Yeah, I was gonna say you can put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Feel free.
Okay, I think it's gonna open soon. I really do. Just, you know, take a bathroom break, have a stretch, ask some questions.
No questions out there?
I have a question.
I'll have a question, unless somebody else has one.
Oh, I think we're overlapping. Go for it.
Go, Kelly. You go. Go, go, go. I've already asked one.
Okay. Anna, hi. This is so cool. We're loving all of it. I'm curious when you like go on these expeditions and are really like in conversation with a place, what kinds of like field, based recordings are you doing? Like how do you go about like collecting material out there that you'll bring back with you? Like how do you stay kind of like connected to a place, these far out places, once you're back in your home place?
Yeah, that's, I wish I could show you my next slide to answer that question, but I try to record just as much as I can. My work is very research-based too, so I do a lot of research, just like reading papers and stuff about the place. And then like for example, I was on a boat for a month to go to the Lost City, and I would like paint what the sky looked like as sort of a weather report every day out of my little porthole. And so those sort of served as recordings of where I was and what the weather was like. And like, I'll like, take cyanotypes of melting glacial ice to sort of capture that. And, I collect a lot of rocks and write a lot, write stories. And then, obviously take like a lot of sound and a lot of video recording. So I do a lot of that, and then I kind of bring it all back to my studio and start working with that material. And then when I'm engaged in doing that, then I'm still like engaged with the place. I don't really know what to do. Does Logan or Anza or someone who's really tech savvy have any suggestions for me? I don't want to shut down my computer because then, or I could sign back in maybe if I restart my computer, or.
I don't know, Logan.
Also unsure.
Okay, well, I'm so sorry. My computer's just totally frozen. I think I'm gonna have to turn it off and then sign back in.
I think that's a great idea. Try that, and we're all here, and you have more people in here than ever. So.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Just take a break. I have the actual good stuff at the end of the talk. I'm so bummed.
The chat has been inspired and super exciting. So everyone's here with you. I don't know if you can see, but.
Okay.
Take time to do your thing. We're here.
All right. I'm going to sign back in like 5 minutes.
Great. Thanks, Anna.
Okay. Can someone tell me if you can see my talk?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Okay, so I apologize about that. This is going to be my ultimate excuse to get a new computer. Okay. So the Lost City hydrothermal vent system is, it's a venting system on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, halfway between the United States and Africa. And I'll try to hurry and go through these slides since I took up so much time. So the discovery of hydrothermal vents was in the late 1970s, which provided the first evidence that the sun was not the only source of energy that living organisms could harness. So they also, so basically that expanded our knowledge to chemosynthesis as an alternative to photosynthesis. And that pointed to an ocean of unfathomable forms of biology just waiting to be discovered. The Lost City specifically was discovered serendipitously in 2000 and has been featured in many studies on the origin of life, and its microbiology serves as an analog to life that may exist beyond Earth. So most oceanographers believe that life first started at the Lost City. So that was pretty exciting. It's a unique scientific and cultural, its cultural value has brought the Lost City under consideration for a special protection by UNESCO World Heritage Center and the International Union for Conservation of Nature. However, I was astonished to learn that simultaneously, the Lost City is also included in a parcel of seafloor that the International Seabed Authority has approved for deep sea mining exploration by a Polish mining company. So yeah, that's right. 30 men wearing suits behind closed doors are doling out our seafloor to the highest bidders. And this threat of deep sea mining for precious metals for the new computer that I need to get that's being explored. So this is the boat that we took to the Lost City. It's owned and operated by the Woods Hole. It's called the Atlantis, and this is Jason, and this is a submarine. And Jason is a remote controlled vehicle that we put down into the water to look around, which I'll talk more about. But so it was a month long, and I don't know if you remember 2018's hurricane season in September in the Atlantic, but it was horrendous. We had to dodge 4 hurricanes on the way to the Lost City, Hurricane Florence, Joyce, Helen, and Isaac. So that was the first time I've ever gotten seasick, and that was a horrible, horrible experience. So that was pretty interesting. This was my studio on the boat, or one of them, and my porthole. And like I said, in terms of documenting where I'm at, this was one of the ways I was documenting the weather and what time it was. And this was day 18 on the boat. And I would just paint a picture of what it looked like every day outside of my porthole. This is the Jason control room. So we would put Jason, the remote control vehicle, down there. And these are images of what it looked like. And they're these like big chimneys that have this hot water coming out. And basically what happens is this rock, serpentinite, when it's exposed from the Earth's mantle to water, there's this process called serpentinization, and it's an exothermic process, so it gives off heat. And that heat and those minerals sort of made the perfect ideal situation for these amino acids to get together and create the first forms of life. And so it's a really amazing process. All you need is rock, water, and heat to make life. So this is a video, but I'm not going to play it. This is a video of the hydrothermal vent systems, and I can maybe play it at the end if we have time, but I don't want to mess my computer up again and slow it down. Oh gosh, I started playing it. Okay, so I'm also a scientist, like I told you, and I heard this is a whole different project now. This is like one of my current projects, kind of. I call it the psychic powers of wood. And the story starts here at Ellesmere Island, around 80 degrees north. And 45 million years ago during the Eocene, there used to be forests here. It looks like tundra right now, and there's 0 trees, but in the Eocene, it looked like a forest in Washington. And there are these species called metasequoia that they thought were extinct, but they actually do exist in China. And this wood, usually wood gets fossilized like this, and it's not woody anymore. But there's this tree wood that happened to get exquisitely preserved in this spot on Ellesmere Island. And I just thought that was so cool. This wood from 45 million years ago. Like, what can that tell us about these forests that used to exist on the top of the world, you know, that's all covered in ice and tundra right now. And so there's a lot of interest around this wood that they found, and studying these ancient ecosystems, because the Pliocene period, which is a period where other part of the wood came from, that's considered a very important example of what our future climate conditions are going to look like, should our trends of global warming continue. Another thing that's interesting about this spot where these forests were 45 million years ago is that there were 24 hours of daylight and 24 hours of nighttime. And so I started looking at this wood and just doing microscopy on it. This is a really weird slide because that's ancient 45 million year old fungus in the wood that's still alive, which I thought was pretty cool. And all the cells were all smushed up because of the pressure over time. This is what today's metasequoia looks like. And that's what metasequoia looks like from 45 million years ago. Their tracheids are all smushed up. So, and then I started doing, I wanted to make this project called From the Paleocene to the Anthropocene, the Sonic Cenozoic Data Project. And so I started exploring this wood more and doing these CT scans of it, which is basically like taking a bunch of x-rays and then smushing them all together and then making a video so you can kind of like enter the wood through the tracheids. But this isn't very detailed, and I need like a higher magnification. So I'm waiting for COVID to be over so I can go to Berkeley labs and use their CT scanner. So it's kind of like Miss Frizzle going on the magic school bus and entering the tracheids of the wood, the vessels of the wood, which is what I want to do. And that's a bud coming out of the wood through the layers of the 45 million year old wood. So anyways, I started making these scans of the wood. And then I met Patrick Rafter, who's an oceanographer / climate scientist in San Diego through the Ocean Memory Program. And he loves this sawtooth data. And this is carbon dioxide over the last 800,000 years. And you can see that the CO2 was up and down, like a sawtooth. And then this is the human-induced rise in CO2. So we're like over 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide. And this is like where the industrial age occurred. And then Marco created Marco Buongiorno Nardelli. I'm never going to be able to pronounce your name correctly. I'm so sorry.
That was good.
Took this data and created sound from it. So Marco is also, he's a physicist and also musician, and creates these amazing pieces of sound and music. And so we can actually, he made this so we can listen to the CO2 fluctuations over time. And it's really a beautiful, beautiful piece. And so I want to incorporate that, into a bigger installation. How am I doing on time?
We're at 6, but everyone's very into this, so I think you can keep going for a little bit. I just gotta please never stop talking in the chat box, just so you know.
Oh, that's so sweet. Okay, well, I'll just tell you about my last final project, and then I'll go. So that's something that I'm still working on. Marco, I'm sorry, I'm slow. But this question about like this 24-hour daylight question came back again. And I was like, yeah, what is up with like, if trees are in 24-hour daylight they photosynthesize during the day, and then at night, that's when they fix their carbon from the CO2 that they get during photosynthesis, and that's when they fix it into chains of sugars to build the trees. And that happens at night. Photosynthesis happens during the day, but it's like, what do plants do in 24-hour daylight or 24-hour nighttime? So our lab went to Wiseman, Alaska, and we went to, it looks like this, it's really beautiful. And we went right to the tree line. So if you go over these mountains, then it's just tundra. But right here, there's white spruce. And the lab and I started working on this question. So basically, we wanted to understand how physiologically in 24-hour daylight conditions inherent to the summer solstice, how these trees fix their carbon. And so we went on the summer solstice, 24-hour daylights, and so we conducted all these different experiments on white spruce that were exposed to this 24-hour daylight, and we gathered data on photosynthesis, on stomatal conductance, so the fluctuations that occur between these like little pores in the leaves of the trees. And we gathered wood core samples for anatomy and leaves to study carbohydrate levels and to sample RNA and to gather all this information on enzymatic activity. So that was all well and good, but I of course got sidetracked and I've been studying methods to record and recreate like unique and fragile ecologies using techniques based on sound, and using the impulse response method borrowed from Tim Weaver, ocean memory and friend and colleague of mine at the University of Colorado. And so in addition to studying the trees themselves, I wanted to recreate the forest using sound, using this method. And this is accomplished by, hopefully going to be accomplished by, you pop a balloon and then you record the resonance that it makes using a microphone. And then the recorded sound will then be processed with convolution reverb software in Max 8, whatever that means. But Tim's gonna help me with that. And then we can recreate the forest using sound, which I think is really cool. Also, while we were there, I started making everybody do these sonic meditations. So imagine 8 scientists meditating with trees after they gather like all the scientific data on the trees. So I got my hands on this. My friend Tim actually gave me this zine by this guy in Indiana. Oh, I can't remember the name of it right now. It's called Ecological Breakdown, Ecological Entanglement, and it's about like meditating with the planet. So in addition to meditating with these white spruce that we had all the scientific equipment hooked up on, I asked the other scientists to meditate with each of the white spruce trees that we were taking our data on, to just kind of like take another approach to studying trees. So to guide the participants through their meditations, I used the breakdown as a reference. Oh, by Brett Bloom, that's the guy who wrote it. And the workbook is designed to facilitate this deep listening sonic meditations with others to individually and collectively experience immersive ecological entanglement. I'm reading from the book now. It's a tool for sinking into relationships one has with the world around them, helping to bypass the ways one has been taught to limit or ignore the subtleties of the more than human world one is immersed in. So for the tree meditation, participants gathered in a circle, and first I prepared each participant for a sonic and tree meditation by guiding them through a more traditional meditation and to transition them to a state that was conducive to the concentration needed to fully engage in the sonic and tree meditations. We then transitioned into the sonic meditation, during which the participants listened to the forest and picked out 3 independent noises. And I asked them to listen with their entire body. And then we transitioned into a vibration meditation. And the idea behind vibration meditation is to receive sound waves with your entire body. So this goes back to like feeling what it feels like to sleep on a glacier. And I was like, whoa, this is so powerful. So I kind of like have this scientific mind, but also I have this like other side of me that like I'll try to listen to a tree with my body. But so the environment produces vibrations and resonances that are perceivable throughout our personal beings. And by sending tones to different parts of the body, one is sensitized to the nuanced ways in which the entire body receives the sound. So I asked the participants to send tones, sense from the environment to the top of their skull, the bridge of their nose, the bones and flesh of their bodies, and then went into a tree meditation where basically I asked the participants to place their hands on the ground first to send tones to the roots of the tree and envision the roots spreading out like far and deep to collect the water and the minerals. Next, they placed their hands on and sent tones in the trunk of the tree. And then they placed their hands in the direction of the leaves and sent tones to the crown of the tree. And I asked them to like, you know, envision the process of leaves absorbing carbon and emitting oxygen and like, you know, they're all tree physiologists, so they're good about that. So after sitting and listening to the entire tree, each participant recorded their experiences from the tree meditation, which I summarized here on the screen. And that's what they claim to feel during the meditation. And this was just like a piece I made based on that when I was in Alaska. So yeah, that like, someone asked that question, how do I record like the place? I just, you know, listen to it and write about it and like do things like this. I don't know if this is like good art or not. I don't really care, but it's just kind of interesting to do. And then I'm working on some sculptures now in my actual studio with wood. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it there. And if there are any questions, I would love to answer them. Or if you're interested, I can show you the video of the Lost City, which the Lost City is a pretty amazing place. Yeah, I'd like to open it up. Let me see if I can get the video on.
I know we had some questions in the kind of like in between time.
Okay.
So if anyone wants to ask their question, or I can go back and read those.
Maybe I'll put this video on while I answer the questions.
Great idea.
Is anyone going to ask questions? I can read some of our previous ones.
If I can just say real quick, it's not really a question, just an observation. Right at the end, when you were talking, and I put it in the chat, but you were talking about your art, and you said, I don't know if this is good art. And to me, I mean, everyone here is going to like shout you down and disagree with you. Obviously, this is good work. But anyway, not to speak for everyone else, but I'm confident in that. Just to say that the fact that you said that to me, that's how I know it's good work, right? That you're doing this amazing stuff and you don't know if it's good. That's how we know it's good. And so anyway, questions, please.
Thanks. Okay, I'm gonna try to stop sharing my screen because it's just.
Well, Dwayne, it's Rob Reynolds here. Hi, everybody. Just picking up on what you just said, one thing that I've really enjoyed about working with scientists recently is that the scientists that I work with are asking questions that they don't know the answer to, which is very different than almost every other kind of person that I've collaborated with. And I think that that's a fascinating thing. And whether that's applied to, is it good art or not, or whether it's applied to what can we learn from a tree in a CT scan, or it's applied to your field work. I think that approach is really super, super interesting. And I'm very excited to have heard your presentation. And I think one thing that I'm really feeling right now, and I don't know about others in the program, but one thing I'm really feeling and I'm very excited about is the kind of unsiloing of disciplines and a kind of real urge to work with scientists and activists and artists and poets, and to be really collaborating in this moment. And I love seeing you at work and at play in this very way. So just a thought.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that this is, it's critical that people from different disciplines have to work together. And I've always said that we should build institutions based on problems, like just climate change, and then poets work there, and scientists work there, and artists work there based on that problem. And then just work together as a team, sort of like the ocean memory team. I mean, we're so productive in so many different ways. People are publishing scientific papers about whether or not the ocean has a memory, and they're getting published, and we're making great art and books. And it's just, it's really exciting to see how productive a group of people who are teaching each other about their disciplines can be. I would never have heard about the scraping of hydrothermal vents had I not been talking to an oceanographer. Like, that's an important thing, that our ocean floors are gonna be scraped. So like, I'd never even heard of that. I didn't know that our ocean floors are being parceled off to different countries. And so like, talking to people of just different disciplines, I think is just so important to get stuff done, especially right now with all of the challenges we're facing as a planet. Does anybody else have any other questions?
I have a question. I raised my hand digitally and visually.
Oh, hi.
Hi. I have a question about, since we're in an interdisciplinary program, and I had my interdisciplinary class this morning. I'm really thinking about, experiment design, which I think scientists do. Like, what are we testing for? What's the hypothesis? How are we going to measure results?
Yeah.
And the sort of like strategy of thinking that you're well familiar with, and then how that relates, or if there's a different, how you might describe the difference between experiment design and like sort of art project design, if there's like a meaningful way to cross those spaces that you do.
Yeah, well, the scientific method can get kind of boring, doing the same thing over and over again. You have to, repeat your experiments over and over and over to get good data, right? To be able to analyze the statistics and prove something. For me, the thing I love the most about art is there's no scientific method, and it's so free. And I can sit down and do sonic meditations with trees, and that counts as research for me and for my work. And I don't have to repeat it a million times, or I don't have to set up an experiment for that. And I do think the scientific method is extremely important. I think science is so important, hard science, especially today for the anti-science people. But I also think that art is so important, and to be able to get away from the scientific method and to just allow yourself to approach your work in whatever way you want, It's so freeing. And that's why I want to be an artist, is because I can just do what I want, how I want, when I want. And I learn a lot more that way.
Gabby asked a question in the chat that I feel like kind of bounces off of that. So Gabby, I'm going to ask your question. Can you talk about how you allow yourself to delve deep into research as a primary tool for making work?
Can I talk about how I allow myself? I don't really allow myself. I just do it because I'm interested. And I think, like, you know, when, I'm not an oceanographer. And so, and then here I am, like, going on this boat that costs a lot of money to a place that I know nothing about. I don't know anything about hydrothermal vents. I'm not a geologist. I'm not a chemist. So I have to read a lot to try to get into a position where I can at least ask some of the right questions to be able to make my work. And so basically, just like, I have to inform myself before I go and talk with these experts in their field, so I can even, like, you know, ask the stupid questions to begin with. And then, of course, like, research, it's, you know, it's fun because you fall down all these rabbit holes that can turn into something really valuable, like good material for your work. And just, like, you know, maps or like anything, like just any kind of documentation, I think is pretty interesting to include. And, like, I really like people who, when they do their exhibitions, show their process and their research process and include things like that. Like all their background research that they do to create, you know, the final object. I think that's just as interesting, if not more interesting, than the object itself sometimes, or whatever it is, the object-less. Sorry, Gabby.
Oh, no, it's okay. So part of why I was asking this question is because so many of our students are, I would say, like, they're not necessarily coming from a space where I think where the students understand that you can investigate subject matter in a research-oriented practice as part of going down these rabbit holes to discover new information or new things to make, both materially and conceptually and subject matter. And so that's where I was coming from. Like, you know, in science, there's the scientific method, and that can get really rote and somewhat frustrating and annoying. And often in more traditional art programs, there's a push towards just letting yourself be totally free and feeling everything and then putting that out. And I think a happy balance is taking those things together, right? So, like, unhinging oneself from a kind of, I don't know, just like allowing to do research, right? And so that's what I found was so compelling in your talk, was all of these elements of research from the science that you're interested in and the art that you're making, and seeing where they go and where they develop, and then how that reveals itself as a new answer or a new problem or a new question, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think all kinds of research or all kinds of approaches, like you mentioned, the scientific method, just like researching for your art, and then also the approach of, I'm just going to do whatever with no research because I feel it. And like, that was kind of how the tree meditations went. It was like, this is stupid, but I'm going to do it. And I think you need, there's a place for all of those separately. But for me, I have to use every approach I can because that's how that's how I learn, and that's how I understand, is like, yeah, just using anything I can. I need all the help I can get, basically.
Karen, you have a question?
Yes. So I'm always curious when I hear people who are able to do extensive research and don't have to have, like, a clear plan of where the work is going to be going to, talk about how they're able to fund that or support that. Like, is it through grants that support scientific research that you're able to find your way into things on? Is it through selling of art pieces that then allows you to have the funding to be able to go and do other things? Like, where does the ability to have the funds for research come from for your practice?
That's a really important, practical, good question. So it's not selling art, because I don't really make art that is really that sellable. Some stuff, but yeah. But no, I've had the privilege of school. I mean, I grew up in a rural poor family with no money, and then going to college and just using every resource I possibly could. Like, the registrar was like having a rich daddy. I borrowed so many student loans to just go places, and just like, oh, I need $3,000 for books this semester, and then I'd like go to Tunisia or something. So I like milked every resource I possibly could in college. Like I said, I studied abroad 3 times and like just learned the system. And then in grad school, like at UC Davis, it was like a really great school to be at because it's great in science and art, but like you have all these like labs, like you have all these things you can use. Like I had a sculpture lab, and then I had a scientific lab and a sterile hood, and like all these people who are willing to help and all these resources. And so like being in school has really afforded me, you know, I just have been so privileged to be able to like be associated with the university. That helps a lot. Or like getting grants or, you know, awards that actually give you money. But a lot of the stuff, like I just do for free mostly, you know, like I just want to do it. And so a lot of times there's no money, but I've definitely been, but I've also applied to grants and just always saying yes. Like if anybody ever asks you to do anything, you just say yes, yes. Like, do you want to go out on a boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean for a month? Like, yeah. You know, do you want to go to the North Pole? Like, hell yeah. And just people sometimes just ask you, and then you say yes, and then it happens. And it just like making yourself like available, and like just keep doing things. Like going to Djerassi residency brought me to the Lost City Hydrothermal vent system and a Sierra Nevada University. And here I am, just by going to that residency and like meeting all of those people. So saying yes, and then writing grants and working for free and not making a lot of money, I guess, I think it's
amazing what they let you do for free. But one specific question about your grant applications, are you writing with scientists for NSF grants, or are you writing in conjunction with other projects? So I've been noticing a trend in which the National Science Foundation and some grant organizations are seeking participants in the humanities. And I'm so very, very curious about a very practical kind of explanation of what one of those grants would have been. Like, how'd you go with Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute to the thermal vent? That's very brave of you, by the way.
Oh, thanks. I was just, like I said, I got involved. So I met Margot Knight, who was a director at Djerassi. She said, oh, you should hang out with this ocean memory group. Then I said, yeah, and went on this ocean memory group thing and met all these people. And then Susan Ling, who is a professor in South Carolina, oceanographer, was talking about the Lost City, and I was like, whoa, that is blowing my mind right now. I didn't even know about serpentinization and that life can start from rock touching water and giving off heat. Like, that's, and I was just into it. And she was like, well, why don't you come as an artist on the boat? And I was like, yeah. So there's a lot of residencies, like especially on boats, that they invite artists. They'll keep a bed open for an artist. And in terms of grants, yeah, I've never had an NSF grant before in my life, but I know that a lot of people who have, and a lot of those big grants they have to have, like the one on the Lost City, that was an NSF grant. I wasn't on it, but that's how I got to go. But they have a whole section of outreach that that the scientists have to fulfill to get that grant. And that's where I come in. I'm the outreach person. Art, and I don't want to use art as a way to get a scientific message across. I don't think that's art's job to be like, this is how a hydrothermal vent works. Like I'm not like a kids museum or something. But it's a great way to, like, if you can do a little outreach, then you can like do your art on top of it. You know what I mean? So like teaming up with scientists who are like, I don't have time for art. I don't have time for outreach. I don't care about high school students, like whatever, I just want to do my science. Then you can be that person who can fulfill that role. And I think that's a great way for artists to get, jump on some of these scientific grants.
So we're going to take maybe like 5 more minutes of questions. I feel like we could keep Anna all night and we could all stay here forever, but just so we can have an evening. So any last burning questions? Ask them now. Jillian. We can't hear you, Jillian. You're unmuted and yet we can't hear you. We're happy to see you though.
Better?
You're quiet, but we got you.
Hang on. How about that?
There we go.
Oh, Anna, that was really fantastic. And
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Just kind of a quick question. Are there any materials that you have not worked with that you are thinking about working with? Any mediums? Because you're doing that. You're like a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
I know, I'm never gonna get good at anything. I'm trying to carve walnut wood right now, and I've never made like carved a tree. So that's something I've been learning. I've been learning about yeah, wood carving tools and stuff, and trying not to chop my hands off. So that's, yeah, I'm just trying to do that right now. I guess like everything's material, right? So I'm not like a painter where I just like make paintings all the time. I wish I was, but yeah, I'm just never gonna be like really good at any one thing. I'm kind of okay with that.
Does that obviously doesn't bother you then? That's
It bothers everybody else, but not me. Like,
I hear you.
You know, like when I was in my PhD program for science, it like drove my boss nuts that I was like taking art classes. And likewise, it, you know, in art school, it was really difficult because I wasn't necessarily considered a serious artist because I had this background in science. And like, I wasn't in art school at that time, like everybody else was. And so it was like, that bothered people. That I had different backgrounds or that I wasn't like focusing on one single thing, which I get it. Like if you're getting paid by a boss, like they want you to do your job. But it's been like a blessing and also like, yeah, debilitating. Like you spread yourself too thin and then you're not like, you know, doing one thing really well. And I've always been like a little like paranoid, I guess, in art school because I didn't think I was being taken seriously as an artist, and like likewise in science, like, oh, I'm not being taken seriously as a scientist because I'm like also doing art. And so, but I think I'm finally starting I mean, I'm 36 and I think I'm finally starting to like get comfortable with being both and spreading myself thin and like that being okay. I think they say in your 30s you're supposed to start getting more confident about like what you're doing. That's what I hear anyway. You sound like you're on a radio station.
Well, I am.
I feel like I'm on the radio with you.
No, no, it's just the microphone.
Yeah, it's really cool. I want to get one of those.
Thank you, Anna.
Do we have a last question for Anna? Someone that's been like holding it and it just like needs to come out. Okay, Logan, I'm going to hand it off to you then. You don't have to ask a question.
Hi. So I'm going to talk, I'm talking about jump in chat. Yanza, is that what's up? All right. Thank you everyone for coming. So the event is officially over, but we want to invite you to continue to visit with each other, hang out, share some social time, etc. But we don't want to give you access to this Zoom meeting to do so. And 40 people is a bit much. So we're trying something a bit experimental. We're hoping that it works out. There's a platform called Jump In Chat. I'm gonna put a link in the chat here momentarily, multiple screens. So if you're coming from the public, as in you're not one of our students, staff, or faculty currently, you can access these rooms in the link I just pasted, or by going to our website, interdisciplinaryarts.org, and clicking the big orange button on the homepage. That will also take you to all of the upcoming events in the next 2 weeks if you want to come see what else we're up to. So there are 3 jump-in chat rooms. They're limited to 12 participants per room. You do not need an account to access these. It's a very crude, kind of old school internet seeming video chat. Also in that link is a brief how-to document. For those of you that have been with us, students, faculty, staff, you can go that way as well. Those links are also in our daily schedule document in purple underneath this event link. It was updated not long ago. I think that's all I got. What do you think, Anza? Does that get through it?
I think that's it. We hope to see you. Think of these jump-in rooms, like I said, like you kind of linger in the lecture room, you walk out into Holman, you want to kind of talk with people, that smoking area right outside the door, like that's what these little spaces are, right? So please connect with each other. And then also, like, I don't think we all need a clap, but I think if we can just like do something to acknowledge, like, Anna, thank you so much. That was amazing.
Thank you very much. I just, and I apologize for the technical difficulties. I just got a message that my hard drive is full. So that's, I think, what is happening here.
This was our first lecture of the residency, and I think it went super smooth.
I was not feeling the same way, but okay. Also, I just want to say thank you to your whole program because I feel like it's such a really great, it just feels really good to be part of it because you're so interdisciplinary and you guys like get it, how important that is. And that really means a lot to people like me who have constantly had to battle against interdisciplinary thinking. And so it's just really great to be here. So thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Cool. I say sign off, jump into a jump-in chat, and thank you all so much for being here. We'll see you tomorrow, maybe. And Ashley and Dan.
Ciao.
This is becoming its own small jump-in chat.
Lingerers.
I'm just trying to export the chat because it was so full of love. Jillian, is that your puppy? I know we're not lingering here. I'm gonna end it. Oh my gosh.
Oh. Anza,
Oh
how
my
did the
God.
recording go?
Good. Oh, I'm still recording. I meant to stop it earlier. Okay.